It's time for Supply Chain Now, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. Greg, we've got a good one in store today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So we've been talking to our guest for quite a while now. It's great to have him on the show.
Agreed. You've been in Atlanta for 25 years now, talking about that, talking about Puerto Rico, talking about logistics and global business. And he's with an international logistics provider with over 340 sites in 17 countries, doing big things in critical sectors, including e-commerce. So stay tuned for a great conversation. Hey, Greg, quick programming note before we get started here. If folks enjoy this conversation, any advice for them?
You know, Scott, no, not really. Yeah, let's, of course, they should listen wherever they get their podcast from. And also, don't forget our YouTube channel. Click to subscribe, ring the bell, so you never miss a thing.
Perfect advice, as always, by the one and only Greg White. But, we're going to get a lot more advice from the world of logistics and supply chain, a lot more with our featured guest here today, Mario Rivera, Vice President, Development and Innovation with Audi Logistics. Mario, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you guys?
Doing fantastic. We were talking kind of in the pre-show. It's been a little while since we initially kind of got together and compared notes and whatnot. And we'd forgotten that you've been in Atlanta. You're a fellow Atlantan. And we were talking a little bit Atlanta sports, Atlanta businesses, the Atlanta music scene. So that was a neat rekindling. We'll have to do this in person next time.
We definitely should. Yeah, no, I've been here, 25 years. It's my American home. Of course, I came from Puerto Rico originally, but gosh, I've been here longer than I was there. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about Puerto Rico. That's where you grew up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was born in Puerto Rico, born in San Juan. I moved in grade school. I was 12 years old. My father, who was a doctor, got a job in the U.S. and we moved to Baltimore, and I spent a couple of years there in Baltimore. Which was, a bit of a rude awakening. I remember landing in Baltimore for the first time, and it was snowing. Here I was coming from.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
From the island, and I did enjoy my time in the snow. And then went back down to Florida to go to high school. I spent my high school years in a town called Coral Springs, Florida. I don't know if you guys know it, but near Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
And from there, I came to Atlanta to go to school. I went to Georgia Tech. I'm a Yellow Jacket, and I actually went to Georgia State as well. So I'm a product of Georgia and Atlanta education. And yeah, I've been here 25 years.
So all right. So I want to go back a little bit. You're sharing some things pre-show. I want to ask you a little more about. If you can, I'd love to get an anecdote about, born and raised in your formative years in San Juan. I'd love for you to kind of share one pastime there or food item or family memory with our audience. What's one thing that really sticks out from your time there?
A couple of things. We used to spend, a lot of people know Puerto Rico for the rainforest. I think it's probably one of the things that most tourists visit. And we spent a lot of time as a family in the rainforest. Every Puerto Rican has kind of their spot in the rainforest they visit, sort of that the family knows. And, you usually have sort of your little map and your way of getting there. They're secretive, and it's, you try to keep it that way. And so I remember spending a lot of time in the rainforest, a lot of time traveling the island, visiting different beaches all over the island. And, of course, everybody knows Puerto Rico for our food. I would say one thing we do really well is cook pork. We know how to roast pork. I think I remember seeing recently a top 3 list of countries that know how to do pork, and Puerto Rico is number one. And I think
gotta be, yeah. Mofongos alone should put you at the top.
Mofongo's great as well. Yeah, maybe another interesting story is I actually attended military school for most of my youth in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
You know, it's always interesting when I tell people about that, because they're like, you know, I guess you were a bad kid at that age already. But you know, in Puerto Rico, we have a whole circuit of military schools that are really just private schools. You go to school, you go home. So it's not about they're not remedial schools as they tend to be thought of here. They're more just private schools, and you know, the discipline of wearing uniforms and doing PT in the morning. And you know, every time I tell that story, people sort of cringe a bit, thinking this is not a good thing. But it's probably one of my fondest memories.
Well, it probably prepared you well getting into, you know, to make it through Georgia Tech, and the amount of discipline.
It's required.
I'm not sure what you majored in, but I bet it helped prepare your path, huh?
It sure did. You know, I don't like to. I have kids now that are 9 and 10, and they're starting to ask about. You know, I have to tell them about their schoolwork and being disciplined and getting their work done, and you know, caring about the product and the work you do. And they're always asking me about you know, what I did. I have to lie to them a little bit and not admit that I probably missed more classes than I care to admit. But but yeah, no, it was the discipline of staying up late, even when you have a little too much fun. You gotta get your work done. So
GSD, get stuff done.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me ask you this, Mario. I appreciate you sharing kind of that father perspective. You know, as a father of 3 myself, I can relate as well. And they never listen to you, but that's okay. Tell us about, you know, if we were to interview your family, your kids, your colleagues, you know, your extended family, what's one thing that they would point to and say that right there is Mario Rivera?
Well, that's a tough question. You know, I would say I'm kind of a type A personality. I don't want to say a perfectionist. You know, I'm not always looking for perfection, but I might be a little intense at times. I think that's probably what my family and kids would tell you. And I think during the pandemic here, where we're all at home together, I think they've felt that pretty strongly, and sometimes asked me to go for a walk and leave the house. But
burn some of that energy off, Dad.
Yeah, you know, I don't like to stop. I like to keep moving, you know, and I think you know, in my professional career, that's I guess one thing. Maybe if you ask the customers or my colleagues, I think they would tell you that you know, I pay attention to detail. Being in sales, I think it's very important to listen to people. You know, a lot of times we're always sort of thinking about the next answer for somebody's done talking, and I think it's just a key way of connecting with people is always to be engaged and make sure you listen to those little details and those anecdotes and stories that they tell you from time to time, and be able to recall them later. So I don't know, maybe being intense and detail oriented. I'm not making myself sound too appealing there, but
No, that's who you want to work with, right? You especially in this day and age, and especially in supply chain logistics, where the details are everything. So hey, I'm ready to go to work with Mario and Audi Logistics now. So
well,
Greg,
I think you've got to be engaged too. So, you know, that you're constantly seeking, let's say, seeking perfection, right? Not demanding it necessarily, but seeking perfection, but also stopping to hear what people are saying. That's a really, really important thing, to engage with people like that and to learn what they're about, and how you guys can share a professional experience from those anecdotes. I mean, that's what we're doing here, aren't we? In a way, is we're learning about who you are, and that it's a great context for learning about how to work with somebody. So now that we know a little bit about you, how have you applied that intensity and engagement, you know, as you think about it in your professional life? Tell us a little bit about some of the things you've done before ID Logistics, kind of leading up to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always had a great deal of curiosity, and then trying not to be a well-rounded professional. I think so far I've had a decent journey in my career. Really, I didn't even start in logistics. I having gone to Georgia Tech, you sort of there's always a bit of an IT or of a computer science element to everything we do. And so I began my career really as a computer programmer, web developer, database administrator. I had some aspirations early on to own a business and be essentially a web services all around type of individual. And I did for a few years there. I did do that. I actually focused on building websites and installing point of sale systems for a lot of restaurants here in the Atlanta area. It was going well, but I guess I got the sort of I started getting a little scared. I got married. I was thinking about having kids, and you start thinking about having a more kind of solid career, and thinking about, well, I went to school and studied industrial engineering, which really has nothing to do with these other things. So I better start getting into a role that I can show some progression in what I studied. And that's when I got into logistics. I started with the Home Depot, actually, as a logistics engineer. And what a great place. I mean, that place moves 100 miles an hour and really just turns
Talk about
out
seeking perfection.
a lot of great professionals. Even today, a lot of the people that I was, quote unquote, in my freshman class with at the Home Depot have gone on to do some great things. But yeah, I mean, I'm an engineer by training. I started as an engineer in the industry. I began first as the type of engineer that's really doing a lot of tactical work at facilities and transportation facilities and programs. And I started to become more of a sales engineer. I started, I think there was maybe a recognition that I did well in front of customers, as so the salespeople would bring me along to a lot of their engagements. And so then I became more of a design engineer, more of a pre-sales type engineer. And then from there, I've spent time doing implementations of facilities, setting up warehouses and setting up operations and different things. I've operated a few facilities. I did that for a short period of time. That wasn't necessarily my favorite stop.
Where was
Why
that?
is that?
This is all at Ryder.
Oh, okay.
I should have said that. Yeah, and I spent 10 years at Ryder. Great company. Have a lot of good relationships there still, and they treated me well and trained me well. And then I got into sales. I got into business development. I think I started to realize that in many ways there were other individuals doing quite well with their finances from my work. And I decided, maybe this is something I can do for myself. And, I feel like there's always this sort of belief that, you're either a technical engineer and a geek, or you're this, sort of talking head sales guy. And, I don't think that's true at all. I think the best salespeople are the ones who know what they're talking about. And I decided, I can do this, and, I can still be an engineer, and I can still know how to talk to people and engage them and make them feel comfortable in doing business with my company. And I've been doing that now for 10 years. It's actually what brought me to Audi Logistics. I had an opportunity to come to this company. I was really looking for while I loved Ryder and it's still a great company in my thoughts, they're very focused in North America. And, I speak a few languages. I speak French, I speak Spanish. I obviously came from Puerto Rico. And I kind of wanted the feel of having colleagues in other countries and having some international component to my day-to-day work, even if it's just in conversations with colleagues. Today, while I work for Audi Logistics and we're a global company in 17 countries, my focus is North America. But I do get to commiserate and be engaged in different discussions on global matters, and it's sort of satisfying that bid that I was looking for.
So can I interject really quick?
Yeah, of course.
Greg, Mario used the word well-rounded earlier, and as he's described some of his professional journey, some that we already knew, a lot of other that we didn't know. Mario, you may be one of the most well-rounded individuals we've had on here in the last few weeks. I mean, what prompted you to learn French?
I was in high school and
you already knew Spanish.
I already knew Spanish, and it seemed well. This will take you back to that whole perfectionist. I had a lot of friends of mine who were saying, "Oh, well, we'll take Spanish and we'll ace it." It just didn't seem right to me. I don't know. I said, I need to learn something new. And
of course, I was cherry picking a bit with learning, being fluent in French, but just to hear your journey from the restaurant industry and technology there to Ryder, to running sites and operations, to now sales and business development, and kind of that well-rounded persona that you offer customers. It really is. When you say well-rounded, you really meant it.
I think a couple of the. Go ahead, Mario.
No, I was going to say I need to interject there because I wouldn't say I'm necessarily fluent in French, and I have to caveat that because I have some French colleagues who might listen to this and
and go, what? Well, I think there's a couple other things that I think are interesting too, is your realization at a point that you needed to really kind of focus on something that fed the family. And I think that honestly, I think a lot of people have that moment. I just don't think they're honest enough to say that that's something that kind of shifted their purpose. So that, there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm curious, as you think about how you got to ID Logistics and things like that, any kind of epiphanal or eureka moments in that past where you would say something really shifted your focus or shifted your direction, either career or personal wise?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I mean, I think early on, when I was running a business and doing web development and working with restaurants, as I had mentioned, there came a time frame it was about a 3 to 4 month time frame that I remember that I had no sales coming in, no leads. And, I think at that age, sort of the realization of like the difficulty of prospecting, and it's still to this day. I've been doing it for, over a decade. And I tell you, it's when I have projects in front of me, I'm in my element. When I have those periods where it's like, I need to go look for projects, I still don't enjoy the prospecting and the chasing. And, it's a very difficult thing to do. And I think when I encountered that for the first time at a young age, I said, wait a minute, I need to find something where this doesn't have to be the primary way I succeed. And then it's funny enough that years later, I come back around and I'm back into that type of role. But, I think that was one of the early ones that sort of pushed me towards finding something a little more stable. But then also, I recall in particular one, and it's really a silly thing, but I was doing a project with a pretty large company. I probably won't mention any names, but let's just say everybody has one of their products in their house right now. And I was working for Ryder, and I was representing one of our salespeople who was trying to sell this project to them. And really, the customer was all on board. It was a pretty innovative kind of solution, and it took a lot of faith and them taking that step with us. And, the customer is basically saying, look, I love what you're saying. I love this concept, but it's a lot of investment. I need a path. we need some short-term wins to generate revenue, to get Ryder into the fold and get you guys promoted so that we can take this bigger step. And, we were about to, it was a team of all these people. I mean, gosh, it was probably a good 10, 12 of us in this pursuit team. And we had come to a roadblock. And, I remember actually after a dinner, we'd been together out as a group having dinner, and we were sort of like, what are we going to do? And I went to my hotel room that night, and this very simple concept came to me, completely unrelated to the project, but just a realization I've seen from all the data I've been analyzing as the engineer, that I basically found this one concept that we could essentially shift the way they were doing something in their supply chain. And with a very simple idea, we generated like $25 million of savings in this
Wow.
chain. It was a game changer. It completely changed the relationship. When I left Ryder, that would have been 8 years later. It was a $100+ million account for Ryder. And, I remember thinking to myself, it's like, if I have the ability to make this kind of a change, then, I should be doing this on my own. I should be leading. I should be trying to be the one in front. And I hate to use the term because a lot of sales leaders use it, but being the spear, or the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
Which I hate it when it's said to me by my sales leader. But there's something to being in front, being on the spot, having to deliver under pressure, and I find it exciting. And
I think that the encouraging thing I think for people to take away is you're not really selling anybody anything. You're solving something for someone and providing them value, and the service that you provide is what you're really delivering. So I think if people think about sales as trying to jam something down somebody's throat that they don't need, that's the wrong approach anyway. But if they think about it the way you did, which is, go away and say, I'm sure you had some moments where you were going, do we really even have a solution for this company? And if so, what is it? And then you come up with something. That's the essence of a sales relationship or business development relationship, is providing a value that somebody will pay for. So I couldn't
agree more. And I think, I don't know that every sales lends himself to that. I think we are in supply chain, we're solution providers. And I think it's a highly technical sale. I think, in my experience, my colleagues and the sales individuals that I have working for me, the best ones are always the ones who grew up through the technical aspects, through the engineering, through the operations, through implementations. They've seen problems. They learn how to replicate solutions that worked before and just tweak them a bit to the situation. And yeah, certainly if your approach is always to have a single solution and always try to push that regardless of the situation, I don't think you can be very successful. And it goes back to listening.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mario.
Yeah, I was just saying, listening. Sometimes we always think it's about saving money, or it's about doing something cheaper. And I have found situations where, like, if you listen close enough, there's people who they're willing to pay more. They just want a problem to go away.
Yeah.
And you got to listen to what the problem is. It's not always the cost. In fact, I think sometimes when you go against the grain in that way, when you stand in front of somebody and say, look, we can solve this, but it's going to cost you more. It's just not the type of thing that that you're accustomed to being told that a salesperson should do. But in the end, some of those problems, these people we're dealing with are human beings too. They have families. They don't want to be called every night because they're having a problem in their operation and then getting on a call and having to deal with things. And if you can offer a solution that takes these grievances and these problems away, it's worth it to them. And that's where the value comes in.
So I think that's a great perspective. I think people often are trying to sell an ROI, but the truth is you're not really selling people towards things. A lot of times you're selling them away from a pain. What's that pain that they are dying to resolve, and how do you take that away from them? And it sounds like you've nailed that concept. So I got to ask you this. I really have to know this personally, and that is, when you think about all of the knowledge that you've accumulated from living in Puerto Rico, living in the States, as Puerto Rico loves to call us, the States, right? Learning 3 languages, going to college, changing your career, going from kind of a role that you didn't like to that being your role in terms of leadership. Is there any bit of advice that you would give to your young self or current young people in the industry that you just think would be critical for them to know?
Well, two things. I mean, going back to that eureka moment when I first got scared away from running my own business because I was afraid to prospect and sell. And I think there's a book out there right now that's basically says everything in life is selling. Whether you do it directly or not, you're always having to promote something and convince people of something. Even when you're in an operations role, any role you're in, you're always interacting with people, and in a sense, when you try to convince them of something, to do something the way you'd like it done or the way you feel it should be done, you're selling. And so I would advise people to kind of have a different perspective on what selling is and realize that it's really about influencing people. Learn how to influence people in a positive way, not just by strong arming them or forcing them into your position. I think that can take you a long way. And then secondly is this is one of my pet peeves. When I have employees that or people I work with who try to really corner themselves into a role. It's like, well, this is my role. I'm the project manager, and it's not my responsibility to do that. Or I'm in IT, and it's not my responsibility to do that. That's for the engineer to do. And there's nothing that bothers me more. To me, it's we all need to wear multiple hats now. Yeah, I mean you have to understand what your position is, and you have to deliver on what your responsibilities are. But I think in today's environment where everybody's so matrixed, everything gets done and with so much collaboration that you have to remember the end goal is, the end goal is, it depends on what you do in your business, but for me is to satisfy a customer with a logistics solution. And if that means I got to call the IT guy and get into a conversation about what IT infrastructure we're going to use in this building because this person has a concern about it, or I need to call the engineer because we need to discuss some specific solution around how we're going to do the order preparation or whatever it is. I think you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and get involved in different aspects. And that's how you, when you help your teammates, that's how you build camaraderie. And then when you need help, they'll help you. And I mean, without this kind of collaboration, you won't be too successful. And I find that maybe now it's me getting a little older, but as I sort of interact with some of the younger kids that are coming out of college, I find that there's a lot of that attitude of highly specialized. This is what I do. That's somebody else's responsibility. And I mean, that's killer for me. It's hard to come back from my judgment once somebody starts to
go down that path, right?
Go down that path, yes.
Yeah.
Don't get on Mario's bad list is what we're learning here. So let's, with all that in mind, I think the last few segments for folks looking to break into really, for that matter, business, not just supply chain logistics, but business and progress on a more rapid pace. I think you've already shared a ton there, Mario. Let's talk about Audi Logistics now. For the three folks that may not have heard of Audi Logistics, I know y'all have grown dramatically and expanded dramatically. We laid out earlier, over 340 sites in 17 countries. Tell us about what the company does.
So we're a logistics service provider. We're a 3PL, or depending on what term you want to use. I guess the distinction we would have is we're highly focused on contract logistics, warehousing solutions. I mean, we do transportation management, but we're not an asset-based carrier or provider. I think the company had the roots in France, founded by three gentlemen that are still essentially running the company.
So learning French really paid off for you, didn't it?
Well, I think it helped in the interview. Let's say that, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Although I find that unless you can speak it perfectly, you're better off.
Just staying with English.
But these guys are really highly technical guys. Sort of the same background as me. They were engineers, they were operators, and I think they, at the time the company was founded 22 years ago now, they were realizing that things were moving in a direction where automation was coming into play, and if you wanted to succeed, you really needed to embrace that, and I think they did that very early on. And when you go to our operations today, you'll find a lot of highly automated facilities. Now, I hate to say that sometimes, because sometimes people think automation is cost, and there's a tendency to just automate for the fun of it. Yeah, I would say we follow very methodical and sort of logical automation, right? And this isn't all Star Wars. Some of these things are small concepts, but just finding innovative ways to make the work more efficient. And I think that's kind of permeates in our DNA in the company. And in the time I've been here, I've been very impressed with the technical capabilities. And so that's what we do well. I would say we run warehouses very well, and we have a tendency to take over sites. I mean, that's a lot of our business is we're walking into existing operations, and we're really analyzing what's there and trying to build off what's there, and through incremental changes, making things better, making things more efficient. Again, it's not always for the purpose of eliminating headcount. Sometimes it's for the purpose of repurposing that headcount to
Right.
do new things. Now we're with e-commerce growing the way it is. Many of these operations that existed in the past for retailers just to pick pallets and move them to big boxes, they're having to rethink these things, right? But many of these companies have huge existing buildings that they've invested a lot of capital into, and they can't just walk away from them. And it's about how to transform them to deal with the new order. And then the fact that we have this completely different process that you have. When you talk about e-commerce, it behaves completely different than the traditional distribution used to. And
Right.
But you have to do both.
Right.
You still have these facilities that have to do both. And so how do you create as they like to say, omni-channel, which is the buzzword, right? But how do you create these multiple environments within one physical building to satisfy everything that needs to be done for their customers? And so I'd say that's Audi Logistics. The company has, in the 22 years we've been open, 17 countries. So, I mean, that gives you a sense for, there is the ID stands for international development.
Oh.
And it's sort of the mantra of the business. They want to get into new countries every year, every couple of years. The U.S. is sort of the latest entry. We started the U.S. subsidiary in 2019. Terrible time to.
I was going to say, that sounded like good timing at the time, didn't it?
Well, yeah, but you know what? It's things will get back, and
right.
Of course, the U.S. market is it is maybe China, U.S. in terms of the largest logistical markets in the world. So, I mean, there's plenty of work to be done here. We have a lot of global customers, many of which are American companies that we're doing business for them and around the globe. So at least that's given us, some warm introductions to customers that we're performing well for globally. And we're asking them to give us an opportunity here in the U.S. to show them what we can do. So it's been a bit of a challenge, right? Really more in the sense of because of the travel bans. We had a lot of the company has a particular way that they like to start new countries, and they actually really bring in a lot of seasoned and trained talent from other parts of the world to sort of help the new subsidiary acclimate to the Audi Logistics way. And this hasn't been possible this time around,
both culturally and best practice and automation speaking, you'd say?
That's right. I mean, it's to bring, obviously the way we've entered the U.S. market was through an acquisition. And so there, of course, there was already a talent base here and a base of operations. They were very focused on e-commerce. And so, we would have had individuals from France, from Brazil is another large subsidiary that we had some plans on bringing some individuals to supplement the team as we grow and develop. Because, hey, you got to share best practices, right? And there has been a successful model for the company to open in 17 countries in 22 years. So we wanted to follow this, and we've had to adjust. But, I find myself on a lot of very early morning or very late evening calls because, we're still trying to have that collaboration, but unfortunately we can't do it in person. But
y'all grown quite a bit, right? We've been tracking you a bit across social media, different press releases. I think y'all just came out here lately with your annual report for 2020. Clearly, you're a big player internationally in e-commerce, and if you're gonna do that, automation is going to be critical, especially in the States. Greg, you and I talk a lot about some of the talent limitations that we find ourselves in coast to coast. So I want to do this. I want to ask you, so Mario, now that we've got a sense of Audi Logistics and we know what Audi stands for now, a little tidbit there. So as Vice President, Development and Innovation for Audi Logistics, what are a challenge or two that you love, day in, day out, week in, week out? I mean, you've kind of spoken to some of these, but what's your favorite part about your job?
Yeah. And, to speak a little bit about kind of the mindset of the company, right? Development and innovation. When I first took the role, I thought it was interesting because at other 3PLs I've been at and other colleagues that I have, you have the people who sell, and then there's the people who innovate. They're totally different groups. And in this company, it's a very important to the leadership that the same individual responsible for business development and growth is also responsible for leading innovation, because they see that one begets the other. I mean, we grow because we innovate. Maybe I hate to say better, but we try to innovate at a pace that outpaces our competition, I guess you would say. And that's been very refreshing to me. As an engineer, I'm solving problems. So when I'm doing these sales, first and foremost, I'm thinking about, well, what's a creative way for me to do this process that it's not done today.
Right.
And that's always been part of what I love about being in business development is I get to touch a lot of different problems. Where when you're an operator, you operate for an account or maybe a particular vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when you're, maybe as an engineer focused on a particular customer, et cetera. I do multiple projects a month. It could be in CPG, it could be in medical devices, it could be in retail, it could be a highly automated operation. It's e-commerce. It could be, we're moving milk in pallets. I mean, you name it. And so it's, being able to touch all these different companies and actually learn about companies. It's amazing how you start to learn about, as a consumer, all are brands, and there's always this sort of naive correlation to, a brand is a company. And then you start to learn about, well, there's these companies out there that own hundreds of brands that, they're moving milk, but they're also moving, cameras and razors, and even within one corporation, you have really just a myriad of different products and processes that they have to support. So it's interesting to learn about, about these companies and how they're made up, and how they grow up, how they begin with one brand, and then that funds some other piece of the company that they acquire. And I find all that interesting. I like to invest. I've been investing since I was fairly young, and I think it sort of helps in your research as well. When you understand companies and how they're positioned in the market, it helps you be a better investor. So I think that, to me, that's my favorite part of the job, is just the variety of projects and problems that I get to face, and try to find an innovative solution to solve, and convince somebody that we're the right person to do it.
So you do face a ton of different situations just because of the breadth, the variation of companies that you work with. And then you throw in this seismic societal disruption, whatever you want to call it, of COVID, and how that's changed the world. And you mentioned e-commerce, how that's changed and accelerated e-commerce, and how that's changed how companies, not only how they do operate, but how they view operations. I think it's a major opening for companies like yours, where a lot of the brands and a lot of the retailers are they're reimagining their core business and understanding that they are really good at acquiring or promoting or developing brands, and not as good, maybe not as strong at the logistics aspects of it. So that's a huge opening. But with all of that as a backdrop, when you think about what's coming, or what you've seen, or what could be, not only for ID Logistics, or maybe not even only for retail or e-commerce or manufacturing brands, what really has your attention in terms of challenges or opportunities or future visions around supply chain? Is there anything that just jumps out at you that, I don't know if I would say it keeps you awake at night, but it at least intrigues you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, not to sound too, what's the word, not to regurgitate what you probably see in many of our supply chain journals, but, micro fulfillment. Just the notion of, talk about bringing, the ultimate collaborative model to distribution, right? And it's, with e-commerce and the way it's growing, and especially been accelerated through this pandemic. I mean, it's become very clear that also with our big gorilla giant of Amazon, that quite frankly is a competitor to every company in this country. I don't care what you do, they're coming after you. And I think that part of how we compete with this is more companies like ours, and the people with the products, the people that can distribute, we all have to collaborate in a more distributed way. And this notion of having distribution nodes all over the country rather than these massive warehouses, it's how customers want it. Now the challenge that comes with that is, and why do we have these massive warehouses and that type of model, is because economies of scale. If you have 100 small facilities compared to 2 or 3 large ones, of course there's an economy of scale to having your larger facilities, but you sacrifice service. So how do you balance the two? And I don't know that I know the answer, but I can tell you there's actually a couple of really interesting companies out there that I think are trying to solve this. I'll mention a couple. There's a company called Stored here in Atlanta.
That's who I thought of first when you mentioned micro fulfillment.
Really interesting firm. There's Flex in Seattle. There's several out there where what they're trying to do is, really they're trying to create this software layer or this cloud layer that acts as the connector to a lot of these physical providers, people that actually have buildings and trucks and can do the work. And rather than having, necessarily a company like us or any other 3PL that, you're trying to basically cover the whole country, build the whole network. I mean, they seem to be sort of more trying to connect everybody all over the world or all over the country for me, or really all over the world when you scale it. So that customers will go through them, right? They sort of another layer, like everything else, I think in our business and our life, I mean, we create these layers of abstraction, and you try to get economies of scale at each layer. And, as a logistician and somebody who studied and lives this stuff, I find that very fascinating. As an employee of Audi Logistics, I find it a little scary too, because
somewhat threatening, right?
To some degree, it is a threat, but I think, it's up to us to find a way of working with these companies, create the right partnerships, make sure that we don't get left behind, and try to be too rigid with our business model, our approach, and be willing to entertain some of these partnerships. And we will have some relationships that are direct with our own customers, and we'll have some relationships that go through other, call them aggregators,
right?
Individuals that are bringing us business based on their model. And at the end of the day, we just have to be the experts at executing and moving things and getting orders prepared, whether it's directly for our customer or on behalf of someone else. And that's something I'm looking at. It's part of my job. I need to look to develop those kind of relationships. So I certainly, try to reach out to some of these folks and get myself connected to what they're doing, and hopefully, something will pan out from that. But
for what it's worth, I see it as an augmentation of what you do, not necessarily replacement. It's another segment of the market that's really highly specialized. So I think there's room in the marketplace for those tiers. To me, you're the solution guy, Mario. So I'm sure I'm not telling you anything, but we owe this to our community as well. To me, I think the core thing is identifying those areas where the retailers and the brands and other companies moving products, where they want augmentation of their capabilities in their logistics network, and how each one of these players applies to that, right? Yeah. I mean, you may not be the right solution for the 4 models of refrigerators that Whirlpool needs in Mobile, Alabama. That's stored, right? But for somebody who has 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 SKUs that they need fulfilled in a couple of days, yours is a much better solution for that. So I think as companies will recognize what that segmentation is.
Well, then on the consumer side, the great silver lining here, as we've talked about throughout 2020, really late 2019, throughout 2020 and start 2021, a deeper recognition and understanding of how supply chain works. And the latest lesson, which is coming to consumers via the vaccine distribution, is that final mile or that final miles, depending on how great the challenge is.
Yeah.
You know, and that despite it all, I mean, how aware the consumer is getting, because they're already savvy, as we all know, and it's deeply impacting their new and ever evolving, rapidly evolving buying preferences and just consumer experience preferences for that matter. So it's really a neat time to be in the industry. It's a neat time to sit down and talk with you, Mario, and learn more about your unique perspective, you personally and as a leader, and Audi Logistics. So I appreciate your time. We're going to have you back on, and you have to give us an update as we get deeper and deeper into 2021. But congrats on all the growth. Congrats on the real meaningful innovation, not the lip service, you know, the buzzword innovation. I mean, when you're in global supply chain, logistics, transportation, warehousing, you name it, it's got to be real, because it's the only way to keep up with the ever increasing volume, which is pretty exciting to say the least. So let's make sure, Mario, that folks know how to connect with you and ID Logistics. You know, I'd love to. We were talking about some. What was the rum we were talking about prior to coming on today?
Ron del Barrilito. Yeah. Rum in the little barrels is what it means.
Rum in little barrels. So who knows? Maybe one of our listeners is going to want to compare notes over some of this delicious rum, yeah, or beer, what have you. Let's make sure we know how to get y'all connected. So what's the best way to reach out to you, Mario?
Sure. I mean, the easiest way, of course, is always through LinkedIn. You know, I'm out there, Mario Rivera on LinkedIn. Of course, ID Logistics has a page as well. I'm always monitoring that. But you know, actually, I'd be curious. We've just recently launched a new site, a new landing page for customers. So I would love for y'all to visit me there. It's solutions.id-logistics.com. And I think it's a great single.
I'm going right now.
Single page. You know, a lot of times I find, it's again modern times. It's you know, the days of these huge websites with hundreds of pages. It's like nobody wants to navigate this anymore. So we've tried to create it's a single page. It has everything you need. It talks about our solutions, our industries, and it gives you a very quick and easy way to basically connect with us there. And it's solutions.
Wow, really good. Yeah.
Solutions.id-logistics.com. And you know, I hope to connect with some of y'all out there. And it was a pleasure speaking with you guys. Thank you. I told you I was a bit nervous, but you know, you guys really do make a guy feel comfortable. So I appreciate that, guys.
You've done good.
Yes. You're too kind. You're natural. I mean, there's so much knowledge between your ears, and just over the last hour, we'll be able to scrape just a little bit out and share it with our community. But love also the give forward stuff that you are doing at Audi Logistics. I recently came across some of the logistics training that you are offering to folks in Brazil, especially young people in Brazil, giving back to some of the nonprofits through your successful 2020. So keep that up. We'll have you back. Big thanks to Mario Rivera, Vice President, Development and Innovation at ID Logistics. Thanks so much, Mario.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Tomorrow.
So now we're going to talk about Mario as if
like he's not here. I
right?
love this part.
So, Greg, as we wrap and right before we sign off, there's so much knowledge. Mario's journey and his path is an intriguing one. Again, so well-rounded, and we need that in supply chain. But what was one of your favorite parts as it relates to this conversation we've had here with Mario?
Yeah, I think except for his kids, probably Mario doesn't need to apologize for being somewhat of a perfectionist and And I think that obviously lends to what he's doing, to the story that he told about, finding a solution for a customer. I mean, somebody that thinks that deeply, that wants to solve that that badly, that's incredibly powerful. And especially in this market where we've got such an incredible need for solutions, and most of us, particularly in the retail and the brands, we have no earthly idea how to solve some of these problems. They're new problems for a lot of companies who haven't delved into e-commerce or haven't really grasped how to innovate and how to optimize in their logistics environment. So having someone with that goal, and of course, not only the ability to solve, but the ability to show you the value of that solution, and frankly, with the education, I mean, to be able to back it up so that you can know that it's a good solution that's being presented to you. That's really, really unique. That to me, that's the big takeaway here, right?
Well,
Mario is the right cat for the job.
I'm looking through my 17 pages of notes, and a lot of what Mario speaks to here today, especially that relentless passion for getting to the root of the problem. It makes me right away think about the infamous Charles Kettering. A problem well stated is a problem half solved. And it may not have gotten it exactly right, but it's so important to know exactly what the problem is, because so many folks stay on surface level Band-Aids, unsustainable solutions. And I appreciate Mario's passion there. So to our listeners, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation. It's really frank, very informative conversation, as much as Greg and I have. If you want to check out more conversations like this, be sure to find us at supplychainnow.com. Make sure you connect with Mario and Audi Logistics. We'll have those notes in the show notes. There's links in the show notes. We're after one click here. That's our commitment to you. And on behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, hey, we're going to challenge you like we challenge our team every single day. Do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.